The thing when you start to learn to sew is you start to learn how to look at garments, and the more you know about garment construction, the more you start to find little flaws here and there, or how it could fit you better, or how the lining could look better. Things like this start to appear to you as you learn more about sewing and garment construction. And the thing though is, how do you know what's worth saving, what's not worth saving? What can you fix, what can't you fix in thrift store items? So in this video, I'm going to go through with you in detail the points that I found in this jacket that I think could have been perhaps made better, but most importantly, what's worth saving, what's not worth saving or spending your time to do, and how I might fix some of these issues, at least the ones that are fixable. Welcome back, my lovely sewing friends. It is rather nice to see you again and see your smiling faces there on the other side. If we're actually just meeting, my name is Evelyn Wood, and here on this channel we do everything vintage sewing skills for modern day sewing to help improve your sewing and get better and better. So if that does sound like something you're interested in, please hit that subscribe button and also the little bell to let YouTube know that you actually want to see all my videos. So every Monday I do at least one item of mending. This particular jacket I was mending for somebody else. This is a family member's jacket. This is what I call garment archaeology, is when you look closer at the insides of something, like a little archaeological dig, you start to notice the garments always tell us a story. And this one, I started noticing the construction of this particular one and just all the things that weren't quite right. I made a video, this one last week, and you really loved it and really wanted to know about what is fixable. So out of all these issues that I did find on this, what is fixable and what's not? What's worth investing the time to fix and what's not worth it? And of course, how might I fix some of these issues? I'm going to go step by step on these. Let me go through the issues. We have the collar, the stretched out collar, the fusing on the facing, the seam allowances on the lapel showing, facing on the jacket's coming out, the shoulder seams are puckery, the welts aren't quite pressed right, the sleeve lining is sort of two different puckering there, the buttons, and the hem is actually like poking down at the bottom here. So there's quite a number. Some are more important than others. I'm going to spoiler for you, and that the hem is the most troublesome one for me, but fortunately it's the easiest one to fix, and I'll show you how I would fix this. That one's going to be at the end though. So let's start at the start, because whenever I'm working on garments like this, I like to start from the top and work my way down. That is just how my brain works. So I hope that that helps you not miss anything either when you're assessing garments. First things first, I need to get into this jacket. So how do we actually get in here to see what is even going on? So I'm going to open up the seam here. It's great because it's even actually hidden in this pleat, and then I will just unpick and then I will stitch it up later to close it, and it will be all hidden underneath there. No one will ever even know. So now we can really find out what's inside, and this is where all of the garment archaeology really begins, because let's have a look. First issue we were looking at is this collar. So it is all wavy and sort of stretched when it is sewn. Now, why would this have happened? Generally, a collar like this is done on a woven fabric. So choosing a knit is perhaps not the right, the very best choice at least, because doing this seam, you're sort of seaming it twice, and every time you do, it stretches out the fabric a little bit, and being a stretchy fabric, it's just stretched out. Maybe there's not enough fusing in here. I can't get in there to know. It still stretches a lot, so maybe that is the case. So, big question though is can this be fixed? Well, generally not. If something is stretched out like this, there's no going back. Once it's stretched, that's it. So, and even if I could, in this case, to unpick all this, there's probably only teeny tiny little seam allowance. When I unpick it, it would almost fray to nothing, and it would just be not worth my time and effort trying to fix this. The next issue was the fusing down here on the facing. So these bubbles down here are actually the fusing coming off the fabric. So it's actually bubbling away from the fabric. Now I know this happens to you a lot. You mentioned it in my last video. I'm wondering what you can do. Well, first of all, why did this happen? So it might have happened because it was just not fused correctly. So maybe it wasn't hot enough or not enough pressure and it wasn't fused enough. That's why it's happening. Maybe it is the type of fusing and the type of fabric aren't compatible. Can it be fixed? The only thing we can really do is repress it and try and melt it back on, basically. So having done that myself, you can see I have gotten quite a good result and it does look better. So this type of thing, I definitely would recommend you give a try as well, but just be very careful because this is polyester fabric, so it will melt just like the glue. The other issue that I've sort of noticed through here is that you can really see the seam allowance through this lapel, and it's just this big stripe down the side. It's not terrible, but it's not really pretty either. So why did this happen? I think this is mostly due to the fact that it has just been pressed flat. They've just gotten the iron, just sandwiched it down, and because the seam allowance is there, and this is quite a thick knitted fabric, so it's quite raised. You've got 4 layers of fabric here versus only 2 being thick, and when you squish it, you just are going to end up with that line. So can we fix this? We could look at trimming it back, but I think honestly, you'll sort of see the same thing happen. I think what the best course of action for this one will be to just give it a repress, but only pressing this top layer and not with the seam allowance underneath. How would I do this? I would get into the jacket through here. I can get right in there. What I can do is use my pressing ham, put that in there, and now I can press it, putting all of the seam allowance down underneath here, so I can press just the lapel. And you can already see how there's that line, maybe you can't on camera, you can see there's a line there that's already kind of pressed in from before. So if we get rid of that, once I have pressed this, it has indeed made that line much more subtle and a lot less noticeable. So that's all we could really ask for. So I'm going to leave it at that, and I suggest that's probably the easiest course of action for you as well if you encounter something like that. One of the telltale things that I found in this one that was sort of poor quality was these shoulder seams here. So you can really notice that you're getting these puckers through here. It's even been accidentally pressed in because you know, not a lot of care was taken in the pressing, so it's been pressed as well because it naturally just wants to flick up here on the back. It's just sitting really funny. So why is this happening? Well, straight away I can guess that it's because of the shoulder pads that are put in here. My guess is that they have just been machined on and kind of probably stretched a bit as they've sewn them on just with a straight stitch machine, because imagine a shoulder pad and everything is quite thick. Let's have a look inside and see. Well, first of all, putting my arm inside here and picking the spot, I can feel exactly that is where the shoulder pad has been stitched onto the garment here. And so that my assumption there is exactly what is happening. So you can see the shoulder pad is even stitched on out here and the seam is in here. So there's always going to be this natural kind of puckering. You can see it happening already here. That's kind of what's happening there. So how can we fix this? This one's pretty easy, and I suggest that you could easily do this one yourself too. Unpick that shoulder pad seam, shoulder pad stitching I should say, stay stitching to hold it on, undo this machine stitching, give it a bit of a steam and a press to press out any creases that were there. Let's just interrupt this broadcast to point out that there is actually 2 different sizes of shoulder pads in this jacket. These are not the same size. Look at this. This one is at least 1.5 centimeters longer in length, and oh my goodness. Yeah, it helps when you have even sides. So I'm going to trim this one down just a fraction and then actually put the shoulder pad back on, molding it as you kind of go. So give it a steam so it sits in this direction over a shoulder, and then hand stitch this back on. So the hand stitching will be much lighter. It will allow for movement and flexibility rather than just kind of springing out. And you can see once I have done this, it has made quite a difference to the look of this shoulder line, which I think really ups the level of how it looks as well, as these small little details that make such a difference. So yes, we can definitely fix those shoulder pad issues, and I think that you can too. Now let's take a look at the sleeve lining and this uneven ease. It's a small thing. It's most likely caused, I think, by a woven and a knit fabric type being trying to sewn together. And it's just become really uneven. You can see it's all puckery here and really smooth here. This is definitely not worth fixing. With just a proper press, it looks a lot better and will suffice. And then of course we also had the welt pocket issue. So it is just kind of pressed down wrong. It's just what could have been done is this could have been obviously pressed better. A little running stitch underneath here to actually hold that lining down in place. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to press this so it sits nicer. Can you see the indent of the pocket flap underneath here in the fabric? That's just because it has just been the pocket down and this pressed, squished really flat. The little corners, it's always hard to get those sitting nicely, but just with a little press and stretching out, you can see that those did end up looking a lot better. And they can look quite nice with just a little steam and press on the welts. So these just need a press and they are good. As we come further down the garment here, the next thing was this lining poking out. The facing is rolling out underneath the jacket. Now I'm pretty sure you've probably seen this before, this happen where, yeah, the facing's just coming out. A sign of not great quality. All that needs to be done, why this happened, is that it hasn't been understitched. So understitching makes sure that the facing rolls under slightly so that you don't get it poking out from the front. So what I'm going to do, this is a really easy fix, but just be careful because you don't want to start understitching so it comes up over your lapel. You need to be careful of that roll line. So I'm just going to start understitching from well down below, and as you can see it makes quite a difference, and this is a really easy fix to do on this and one that you can definitely do yourself and makes a big difference to how that looks really nice and crisp and sharp now. Let's examine these buttons. What was wrong? I've actually already fixed some of these because they have come off, so it was actually missing them. And they're unevenly spaced between the seam here and unevenly spaced between each other, which just shows that it just wasn't measured properly and does not care. And not that it's necessarily wrong, I think that this is just wrong on this. They're very loose and they flop around. So it's just a case of, well, as you might imagine, this one is as easy as sewing on a button. Yeah, and I'm actually where the shank is on these. So rather than just one center, I'm going to sew a little bit on this side, one in the center, and then some over the other side to kind of really hold it on in a more broad sense so it can't move around as much, and obviously centering up those buttons. So this is a really easy fix and of course makes a big impact when your buttons are even and neat. It's something that doesn't, like, you don't notice is wrong at first, but you just know something's not quite right. Let's examine this hemline. So the front here is just dipping down. The actual hemline is coming past where the fold line where it should actually, you know, come down. So why is this happening? It should not, definitely not, the hemline drop down like this. So why is this happening? Well, very quickly I can tell by just moving the seam lines here that in fact the hemline as it's folded up is not actually stitched down to the garment. It's only being held by a little tacking stitch at each of these seams through here. And then particularly when you get to the front, and this is this larger part without a seam to hold it in the middle, it's just enough that it's going to keep falling down. So I guess the real question is, how do we fix this? Now this one's rather easy, and I think this is actually one of the things that makes it look far less tailored and less quality to me. So I would definitely recommend fixing this, and it's quite easy. So I came in through here because I knew I was going to sew this up after. All that we need to do, if I just fold this down, this is the actual hemline up through here. Now it's already folded in place and is sitting exactly where it should sit. All we need to do is just invisibly hand catch this seam line to the actual garment fabric at the back here. You can go ahead and use any kind of hand stitching that you want. I'm just going to use a really simple, easy little whip stitch and just doing it invisibly. Now, for my members of Vintage Sewing School, you of course have a number of different hand sewing techniques inside the membership. For those of you wondering what Vintage Sewing School is, that is my online sewing school where I have a bunch of different lessons and monthly calls and tutorials where community there is amazing, where we all just learn to really take your sewing to the next level. So if you are interested, please go ahead. There are links down below. With the hem actually now attached and sewn up, you can see just what a difference it makes. It will no longer fall down. It looks crisp, neat, and sharp, making it look much more professional and I was going to say high-end, but that might be a bit of a stretch. So just what has actually made the biggest impact here? Because I'll be honest, this took a long time to do. I think the biggest impact was definitely with the shoulders, though this area was probably the one that I didn't like doing the most, probably took the most amount of work, but it has made a really big impact into how that sits. The buttons, obviously, if they're falling off, makes a big difference, and I would say that the hemline has made the biggest difference for me as well in making that nice and crisp and beautiful. Those things with a good press. Yeah, pretty much all of these things are just better with a good proper press. So if there's anyone still watching this video that thinks that they might still skip the pressing step, don't. don't skip it. That's the single biggest thing that you can do to make any garment look better is pressing. I actually made a video about that. If you want more, I'll also link all of those down below. So do check the description box below for all of those links. And yes, me. Shh, I'm making a video. Thank you. Oh, and of course you're probably wondering, how did you close up the garment? Yeah, so really easy. This is quite common in jackets. You've got the slip opening here, just hold it really tight and then just basically top stitch or edge stitch along that seam and fold it closed and give it a press. And that's it, it's closed back up. So I really do hope this video showed you at least a good look into this garment, what you might be able to do when you're next thrifting and looking at clothing, and just what a difference a few little tweaks can actually make to your clothing. Let me know below what you thought of this fix-up, which ones you might try for next time on your own garments. I would love to hear it. If you like this video, if you liked it, and if you know someone else who is really interested in sewing and thrifting and altering ready-to-wear clothes, if you would share this video with them, because it helps get my message out and it spreads the word about sewing. So, well, that's it from me today on this one. Until next time, happy sewing, bye.